Welcome to another episode with the Culture Jockeys. We're spinning to you the latest and greatest in arts and entertainment. Coming to you live from the most relaxing fucking room in Leverett House. I'm Richard Nguyen. I'm studying psychology here. I'm a rising junior, and I love movies. That's what I do all day, every day, and that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Joining me is my co-host with the most, Sherry.
Hey guys, my name is Sherry. I'm also a rising junior at Harvard, and I love music. Yes, and pop culture as well, which is what we specialize in here at the Culture Jockeys. Yeah?
Yeah, that's right. That's what we do. And what are we gathered here today for?
We are gathered to discuss the recent horror film It Follows.
It Follows, by a director who we should know the name of, but I totally forgot. We'll just call him the director.
Yeah.
No, but he's a rising star in the horror scene. As many of you might already know, It Follows has been critically well received. Everybody's loving it. It's making waves across the indie scene as well as the horror scene, and people are putting it on a pedestal, saying that it's one of the greatest reinventions of the genre since Cabin in the Woods. Something like that. That was in the trailer. I don't know if that's what people are saying. But we watched it this past Sunday, and I am a horror junkie as a background, and I'm really big into horror movies. I love the thrill. It's it's just one of those experiences that hurt so good, right? I'm sadistic like that. But how about you, Sherry? What is the horror genre to you these days?
So yeah, I haven't seen that many horror films. I normally try to avoid them. I see them, like, I see going to a movie theater to see a horror film a waste of money for me, because my hand is like not really covering my face. You're not really watching anything. Yeah, I'm never actually watching anything. I'm just hearing all the sounds. Oh man.
You're missing out, bro.
Yeah. But I kept my eyes open, and I watched the vast majority of It Follows, and I realized all the horror movies that I'd seen weren't what people were calling smart horror, or like more subtle, like artsy horror, rather than the really cheap cliche horror that like comes out every couple months in theaters. Yeah. So.
And I mean, you mentioned smart horror, and I think what we're trying to, I guess, capture is the idea that modern horror films don't quite have the same moments of tension as we would want from well-paced thrillers like The Shining, or the good horror films like The Exorcist, I'd say. And even more recently, The Conjuring, I'd say. We had a previous episode. Sorry. we had the previous episode on horror with The Babadook, which is our episode 11, I believe. But yeah, we had a good discussion about that in the sense that the scariest parts are the moments in between you knowing that something is going to happen and the scare actually popping out at you. It's the moments of tension between that something's about to happen but not yet, and that's real anticipation, that's real tension, and that's real atmospheric scares for you, right? Because you get this general foreboding sense that something bad's going to happen, and that's what you're afraid of. Yeah. Whereas I think for a lot of modern horror, the focus is mainly on the actual scare itself, the jump, or the the random loud crash happening, something popping into the frame, right? And that's typically accompanied by a very large, shrill noise, and that's more surprise and shock, and that gets you. It really does keep get your hairs raised and get you at the edge of your seat, but you can't help but feel as though you were cheated, as in that's just surprise. It's not actual. It's not actually scary. Yeah, it doesn't really endure. Yeah. And what a lot of, I think why I haven't watched that much modern horror in theaters is that, it's just like really short, sudden, ephemeral like bouts of surprise. And that's it. And you leave like being like, oh, I'm scared, but like the next day, at least for me, it's just like, It's not one to make you go to sleep thinking that there's going to be something, or like make you think about the supernatural, or making you afraid of the environment in which you're typically safe in. I think that's what I love about horror, the horror genre, is the defamiliarization of the ordinary object, right? Making you feel uncomfortable in a previously comfortable space. That's why we have the haunted horror house films where either one person is possessed, or in the case of The Conjuring, the whole house was possessed, I guess. And it's yeah, like nobody wants to feel as though they can't, they have no refuge from the mysticism or the unknown, right? And that's really what's scary about It Follows. Is that the majority of, you know, the rules of this spirit or this ghost or whatever, it's like a lot of it is unknown. You don't know where it's going to be or how fast it is or when it's going to get you. You just know that it's eventually going to catch up to you.
Yeah.
No matter how much you try to avoid it. And you guys might be confused right now, but it is the embodiment of an STD.
Yes.
Right? And that's, I guess, this it is a spirit that follows you around. It's at a walking pace, mind you. Not even briskly walking, just kind of slow.
Very slowly.
Treading, just, oh.
It's slow but not stupid.
Yeah,
that's,
it's slow but not stupid.
Yeah.
That's what one guy would say. And when it touches you, it kills you. Or like not touches you, but like it eventually when it reaches you and you're stuck in a corner, it's going to get you. Which is why, as one character said, don't stay in a room with less than one exit, right?
Yeah. Or
okay,
wait, no. I mean, duh.
So don't stay in a room with 0 exits. All right, gotcha. Don't stay.
Always stay in a room with more than one exit.
Okay, more than one exit. All right. And the only way to get rid of it is to have sex with somebody and pass it on to someone else. But the thing is, if that person dies, then it moves on to the person who previously had it.
Yeah, so it's always there.
Yeah, it's always there. You're still afraid that it still might come for you. I think, is a very genius premise, or something that sounds so stupid, right? If you can suspend your disbelief for just a moment, it's quite a terrifying situation to be in. And what I'm theorizing, and what a lot of film theorists have theorized, I guess, about horror films, is that since the 80s, they've been a reaction to the AIDS scare. Right? I could have sworn I talked to you about this.
I don't.
But the AIDS scare. Imagine that. Like, put yourself in that position where you're a regular member of society. You know, you're a good citizen. All of a sudden, in the newspapers, you hear something about this new STD called AIDS or HIV that's making waves. Apparently, someone had sex with a monkey, and now it's been spreading across like wildfire. And there's no cure. Doctors have no idea how to deal with this, and now they still really don't. Yeah. You can only really prolong your life rather than actually cure, because it's always going to be within your genetic code, from what I can recall in my pre-med days, now ex-pre-med. But it was a very scary thing, and I think that was really captured in the recent film Dallas Buyers Club, if you haven't seen that yet, from a more realistic standpoint, if you want to have a more historical perspective. But I think a lot of it, yeah, like it was still is an STD, and yeah, it's a general paranoia of who might have it, and a lot of that fear and horror have been displaced on a lot of minorities, such as African Americans and homosexuals, right? You displace that fear onto other people, the out group, so that you yourself feel safer, thinking that you belong in a group that is more resistant to a unknown fear, an unknown entity like AIDS, right? But back to the relevant point here, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th. Who would always die first?
I haven't seen those films. But who
if you were to gander a guess as to who would die first,
was it? I guess were there minority characters in there?
I guess a lot of minorities died in those movies.
Okay.
But see, you have a bunch of dumb teenagers hanging out in the woods. Who would die first? The ones who are having sex. The ones you'd be like, hey, let's go out into the woods and let's do it, right? And so the slashers in these slasher films would be punishing the ones having sex, or infidelity, right? Sexual infidelity. And that's I think it definitely points to a greater, broader fear of society that people had about being free and open with sex like that, because you never know who has it or when you're going to get it. And so that's interesting, right? Like, you wouldn't necessarily think of that, but it's sort of, it's not like proven, it's not a fact like anything in art or culture. But I generally think that's a very consistent trend in horror films.
So that it follows sort of blows that to like full proportions and makes that the premise of the entire
It
film.
capitalizes on that very phenomenon, right? And it kind of looks back at that kind of era in a retrospective lens, because I think it does take place in the 80s.
Yes.
And you get that sense from the score by Disaster Piece, who I think
it was so effective.
Yeah, it was like the synth sort of electronic sound.
Yeah.
He did a video game called Fez, which had a great soundtrack as well, if you want to listen to that. But no, like it was such a different sound from what you'd expect in a horror film. Going back to the classics, right? It was always about the dissonant shrills of the strings.
Yeah. It'll be like extremely dense. There would be a lot of sound. Just like, yeah, like very few. I mean, I guess aside from moments of anticipation, very few like actual silences. Yeah. But then it was a lot sparser in It Follows.
Yeah, no.
A lot thinner.
A lot thinner.
Yeah.
And I guess you get to a different timbre of sound with the electronic synth.
A lot more like metallic.
Yes.
Than previous like films. Like I guess the really famous like time-honored horror films were like orchestral.
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
That's why they were so dense.
The strings definitely, like more shrill they are, right? More dissonant chords. I don't know exactly. I might be butchering the terms.
More or
But
less,
no. If only you've seen more, you could help me out here with the terminology. But no, it was very interesting, and I definitely welcomed this it was refreshing in that sense musically. And it was also refreshing in the sense that following up with the great horror film The Babadook, right? It was about atmosphere. Well, the Babadook's atmosphere was different, I'd say. I haven't seen it in a while, but if I were to put my finger on it, it'd have to be a general fear, I'd say, of this monster, this Babadook, right? And again, the defamiliarization of the familiar, defamiliarization of the ordinary object, in the sense that things in the environment are no longer what they seem to be. The protagonist starts to look at a suit, or this jacket and this hat, and all of a sudden it forms into the shape of a monster. And she'll look away, and she looks back, and it's just what it was before. Just a few objects that just happened to form. Again, like it kind of speaks to our tendency to try to form patterns in our mind. And horror, I think, stems from I'm going on different tangents. From like this biological necessity to form patterns. And I think it's it's evolutionary, really, because when we are afraid in the dark, it's forming these figments in your imagination that make you scared and make you try to retreat to safety. And the Babadook was a deterioration of that sanity, right? That one might want to have, and it was a much more in-depth look into that, the border between sanity and insanity. And how really these monsters are all in our head. And that's the more you deny them, the stronger they become. And that had a whole metaphor along with her grief. And grief itself is a monster. And I'm not going to spoil anything more for you, but if you want to know more about that, go to episode 11 about the Babadook, because it gets really intricate and complicated. But it's definitely it was my favorite horror movie of the last year. And if you want to see it, it's on Netflix. But back to the relevant point, which is It Follows. Instead of that, focusing on the distinction between sanity and insanity, we have a monster that is very real, as we will discover, right? And it's more about paranoia. It's, again, like evocative of the 8th scare of the 80s. Not knowing where it might be, where it's coming from, but knowing it's always lodged in the back of your head. This fear that it's coming right at you, man. And when you do get it, what are you going to do with it? That's the scariest part, right? Like I think It Follows perfectly captured that feeling of paranoia.
Yeah, and thinking just in terms of how a lot of the scenes in It Follows were shot, there are a lot of scenes that are just like a minute or 2 whole minutes of like people sitting in a car, like driving down. And one defining characteristic of It Follows as a whole is that just the anticipatory element is just drawn out so much. There's just so much waiting time in between each scare. Yeah, but you just see like these people in a car, these teenagers just like thinking, and they're like really scared, and then like so are you. Like you have no idea. Like, is this it like right behind them? Yeah, I don't know.
And the it can take a form of anybody.
Yeah.
A person who you hold dear to your heart, or a random stranger. And typically, I think it generally took the form of somebody who you would probably fear, or fear who you fear would die, someone who you fear, like I guess who you wouldn't want to be killed by. I guess I don't know exactly.
Yeah, the fear that goes both ways. Yeah.
But it goes to the very extremes, like the old, like okay, so I'm in the school of thought that the scariest things ever in spirit form are little children and old ladies, and you have a little child and an old lady, as it becomes one of those things, right? And it also becomes this really tall dude, this freakishly tall dude with a white shirt, and he's scary as well. And like the thing is, they were just sort of pale, right? They weren't gruesome or horrifying in any of this.
There was except for one scene at the very beginning. I don't think, and then one scene towards the end. There was no blood, from what I recall.
Right.
Yeah, and that's also one like I am normally really queasy when it comes to blood in film, whether horror, action, whatever. And I think that's why I was able to watch so much of this. Now that I think about it,
I guess it's a testament to the quality of the film that it didn't need blood or gore to be horrifying. And I think that's a trend in horror movies these days. I mean, I'm generally saying these things these days, but like really is like true that there is an over-reliance on the shock factor of not only jump scares, but of the gruesomeness of what you're actually seeing. Yeah. And when a horror film actually hinges on that, it's not as satisfying. It's just disgusting, right? It's not as thrilling.
Yeah.
And It Follows was definitely more about the dread you feel when you see your death coming at you.
Yes. Yeah.
You're very death. You're very, as teenagers growing up, you think you're invincible, you think you're powerful, but upon entering an adult world, after coming through sex for the first time, things become much more scary.
Yeah, right? And those scares come much more slowly, but very surely at you. Yeah, that's depicted in this film. Yeah.
And it's really poetic sometimes too. I mean, sometimes a bit heavy-handed with its parallels to The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. They talk of certainty.
Which they quote,
Yeah, they quote, and they talk about the certainty of your fate, of your death. But like, really, it's quite ambitious for a horror film to try to make a literary meaning out of your scares, right? And I commend it for doing that, because there is something true to that, right? Like, for what the AIDS scare did to people in the 80s. Who, for America, thinking they're so powerful and strong, like being a superpower, right? And in the same way that, for kids entering adult worlds, for having to be responsible for the first time for your actions, you start to realize that you're not going to live forever, and then you are vulnerable. There are things that can kill you, and that's a scary thought. But let's transition to the craft of the film. How is it so effective?
So even just like the colors, like, so as a whole, this seemed to go back to, it was like retrospective in terms of like technique, retrogressive. Retro. Yeah. It was retro.
Just retro. It takes place in the Detroit suburbs, right?
Yes, so everything about it was retro.
Horrifying place. Sorry for you Detroiters out there.
Yeah, so like the film quality was new, but all the technology was old. The like old TVs. Going back to like how they created a sense of horror, it was much more in the anticipation than in the scares themselves. Yeah, in terms of like cinematography, lots of like really long, drawn out shots.
There are a lot of slow pan-ins as well.
Oh my god, some of my favorite scenes were like when the camera's just circling around a room.
Oh my god, I remember that in high school. It's just the whole 360.
Yeah.
Right, and in the sense that I think that captures like the defamiliarization of something that just seems so regular and ordinary.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah, okay. There's like good 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, like devoted to a classroom, and there's something happening outside the classroom, but not inside. And but like the camera just circles like around the teacher and all the students, and you're just left wondering like, is there anything going on here? Yeah.
It just evoke a fear of something intruding in on your safe space that used to be a safe space, and then I think that's something that, you know, when you're leaving a horror film, you're constantly scanning the environment. You're trying to parse out to see if there's anything dangerous or threatening. And that ties back to my love of horror film, that it just kind of rekindles that sort of evolutionary urge to be, I guess, aware of your environment, the necessity to constantly be, I guess, wary, right? Because in the society we live in, we're so safe. We feel so safe in this world. And it's thrilling to kind of return to a more primal necessity to be a bit more defensive. Be a bit more on fight or flight, exactly.
Yeah.
Be suspicious, be paranoid, right? Not saying like I want to feel like that every time, but it's exhilarating to go through a horror film and have to go through that again.
Yeah, and like to leave. So yeah, what this horror film did that like I did not feel at all really for other horror films is like it put me in the shoes of the main characters, and like I really, not that I had this similar experience myself, but I like related to them for some reason. I think it has a lot to do with how the film was shot. Yeah, and then like I left the theater, at least for a little bit, just being so much more aware in that much more profound way of my surroundings.
No, you start to scrutinize little details in your environment more often after, I think, horror movies, which I think I should do a psychology study of or something like that. Show people a horror film and see how much they are aware of their surroundings. And if I can, holy crap, light bulb moment.
That would be awesome.
But yeah, I think that's, you become much more appreciative of the world you live in. But anyways, that's kind of going off topic.
And then also, based on the perspectives from which some of the scenes were shot, you didn't know as the viewer if you were in the shoes of like someone like the main character or like it.
Yeah.
Yes, especially
like something like the it peering in onto the character,
right?
With the slow panning in, right?
Yeah, because like through that you're following other people. So like, are you it, or like are you supposed to be like on the same level as the main characters? Yeah.
And it becomes very clever because again, this it can only be seen by those who have been infected, or are infected by it, right? And nobody else can see them. So sometimes you are in the shoes. Aesthetically and like visually, you are in the shoes of the protagonist because you can't see it. But sometimes you are in the shoes of those of her friends around her, and it is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, that sort of kind of ties into that paranoia of something that may or may not be there, and they're confused as well, saying it's like, wait, is this actually real? Is this actually happening? And her mental deterioration is made all the more effective by us being transported to their eyes.
Yeah.
Because again, like, you're juxtaposing her fear with someone's inability to understand that fear. And you look at this wreck, this emotional wreck, and you're looking to where she thinks it is, but you can't see it. And so that kind of brings out to light just how hard it must be for someone to explain the unfamiliar and the unknown to someone else.
Yeah, and then to see to what lengths people who can't see the horror will go to like protect other people. Like the pool scene, I won't give away too many spoilers, but it was just like so extravagant. As they're waiting for it to arrive, I was just wondering like, is this? Part of me was afraid that it was just like a lost cause. I don't know. They just had like so many things laid around, and they're just sitting there waiting, and like it. I felt sort of hopeless like on their behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like, it just shows how good friends they are, because I would never fucking do that shit. I'm like, yo, you're fucking insane. You're gonna die anyways. And when you think about it, the film is quite nihilistic about the subject matter, right? In the sense that it's kind of pointless to go against something like this that is so, I guess, dominant and so ever-present and can't be killed, can't be destroyed, right? It will always be there.
Just thinking to the end of the film now. Yeah. No, well, no one really emerges victorious.
No, not at all.
I'll say, yeah.
It's more of an acceptance and acknowledgement of it. And just, you can't destroy it, you can't conquer it. It's an insurmountable like obstacle in your life. And that can be, I guess, extended towards something, thematically at least, something that you approach in life as kids entering an adult world, right? There are some things that can't be overcome. And you can extend that back to the 80s, the AIDS scare. And that, I mean, we're still trying to do our best to work against it today. But sometimes, like, I guess it's tries to bring out like the pointlessness in these efforts, and which is kind of depressing when you think about it. But again, it's a horror movie.
In some cases
it's pretty depressing, right? And that's just another perspective on that conflict. And I mean, optimistically, I would say that I would much rather look at it towards the kids entering an adult world standpoint, right? In the sense that you know, you aren't invincible. Right, and there are some problems that, you know, can't be overcome. But in your own way, you can overcome it by living with it.
Yes, and like it's much better to overcome it by acknowledging it and working with it than by trying to deny it. Otherwise, the problem will only grow.
Exactly. Going back to the Babadook.
Right.
All right. But I generally love this movie. I thought the craft was great. They showed the director showed a masterful, not only like a writing, but also in directing and visually, from a visual sense.
Visually
he had complete control of the camera, where exactly what he wanted us to see. Exactly, and took us. Horror movies, you can be a bit more creative with your camera angles, where like the 360-degree spin, you can be a bit more, you know, twisted and kind of creative with that, because you can break immersion. I think that's the idea. It's constantly immersion breaking, right? To be shocked like that. Whereas for other films, like regular old dramas, they want you to have it be like a nice smooth experience, so that you can be completely engrossed and invested in the characters' conflicts and everything like that, right? But as you can see from James Wan takes it to the extreme. He just like twists and turns. You're like, oh my god, what's going on? You know. Also, I thought the writing was. I think it was really, really serious about its subject matter, but sometimes you get clever hints and nods to just how ridiculous the situation is. Like when Greg, I think it was not Greg, sorry. When the guy who gave it to the protagonist,
Hugh,
yeah.
Hugh is his like pseudonym, but
Hugh. When they're all sitting in the circle and he sees someone walking in a soccer field.
He's like, do you see that girl? Oh, and they're like, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it could have been it. It was actually just a freaky looking girl walking around, like, but it just brings to light, like, sometimes people look creepy when they walk around, you know? It's so true. I look creepy when I walk around.
Right.
But if I were to give it a rating out of 4 stars, I'd give it a 4.
You give it a 4?
I'd give it a 4. I mean, considering that it's a horror film, and in the horror genre,
I would say 3.5. Let's say 3.5.
All right, trying to undercut me a little bit. See,
Sorry,
Richard, you're so generous. I'll be not as generous because I'm cool like that. But it's interesting because we can do a little slight tangent on this, but critics love it. 96% Rotten Tomatoes.
It's one of the highest, ratings for the year.
Which is interesting, and some people. I mean, we were at a screening for this, and they were a little. Some people were not so crazy about it. Others were like.
Most of the people that I guess were sitting around me, they're like, the movie ended. It went to credits, and they're just like, what?
Yeah.
No, and then they just left like shaking their heads.
Really?
And being like, the ending was so weird. Why? Like, I guess they just seemed really frustrated that there was no closure.
Because there was no resolution. And again, that points to the kind of nihilism of the whole affair, right? And the pointlessness of struggling against something so powerful, right? And that you just have to deal with it. But I get that. I think it's a general... I'm going to sound so condescending when I say this, and pretentious.
Please, go ahead.
I mean, like... Classical Hollywood filmmaking with the classical 3-act structure always has a resolution. Something solved and you're happy and it's a happy ending, right? But we don't need that all the time.
Oh No,
Do
yeah,
we?
no,
No way.
and that's probably why like critics love this film so much, is because it deviated so effectively from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes there are films that are so dark, and so like annoyingly dark, saying all it wants to do is be really, I guess, yeah, freaking nihilistic, and that's really all it's trying to be. Then it's kind of okay. Well, now it's trying too hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now it's trying too hard to be cynical and depressing.
Yeah.
But I think this really deserved it. What with the subject material and all that, like it's a real threat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a threat that can't be overcome. But, you know, this definitely ties into modern horror movie trends and why we keep on getting shitty horror movies. Right? Because I think they were also expecting a lot more jump scares. Like generally to have those piercing moments of, whoa, what? Like just true surprise. When really, I think the great part about this film is that you're constantly kept on edge. Not all the way to, the highest point where, your heart rate's like, your heart's gonna burst out of your chest.
Yeah.
But you just generally feel tense throughout the entire film.
I don't know if this is the right analogy to make, but like, so have you ever done like high intensity interval training?
Oh yeah.
So it's like just like longer periods of like relative, stability, then like huge peak, then it's go back. Then
Exactly.
So it's like that as opposed to just like a very steady, like high, high amount of effort, high amount of intensity, right?
Yeah.
And I guess It Follows is much less about those like, those like really like sporadic peaks. It's about a very gradual like building up.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Instead of like high peaks, low valleys, it's high valleys and slightly higher peaks.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you don't really get a break at all.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't feel relaxed. And again, tying into the sensation of paranoia, you never feel safe. Not even in your own home. The defamiliarization of the ordinary.
Yeah.
What? We just critically analyze this shit,
What?
man. But, I think if we want to fix this horror movie trend, we need to show studios that we want more of the artful craft that's behind films like It Follows. And, I don't think it doesn't deliver particularly the literary, with the literary allusions quite as well. It kind of seems clunky where it's like...
Right, it's like, we'll just add in a quote. And
it's so on the nose where it's like, they're literally narrating it in front of you, and it's just like, okay, I get it. This is an illusion, isn't it? It is really on the nose when it comes to that. But I think in terms of craft, this was highly effective horror. And it worked on me. Not in the same sense that because I really love The Conjuring, because after the movie, I kept on going on Google and looking up, because it was based on a true story. But on the ghost hunters and like the true case that actually happened, like this, it instilled a fascination with the supernatural, of ghosts and beings. And It Follows didn't necessarily quite do that for me, because it doesn't tie into an actual true story. But it did make me, it spurred on this conversation, right? And our ability to tie it to phenomenons in history. And of societal trends.
That's definitely interesting. Yeah.
Like that's what horror movies should do, right? To have more meaning behind them. I definitely think that this was a meaningful horror movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Any last thoughts?
Cool. So this is totally going off from the horror genre, but I'm thinking about the like disconnect between critics' reviews and audience reviews. So I would give this horror movie like a 3.5, but I guess some of my peers who are watching would give it at most like a 2. Whereas it was like critically it was almost 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And then for some reason I thought of Mad Max, the film, the latest film, which I had seen a couple weeks ago. And
here we go again. We got the hater here, tricking her haterade.
Oh, sorry.
God.
That film was also, I think, at least 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was like really highly rated.
Yeah, it was pretty high.
Yeah. But I'm still really confused by it. I wouldn't give it a 4 out of 4. I don't know if I give it a
I give it a 4. I give it a 5 out of 4.
Yeah.
Holy shit, Mad Max
Yeah,
Fury
and
Road.
I know other people in like both camps. But I think one reason why it was so highly rated is because it like deviated so much from the traditional structure of the film.
Yeah.
It was just like one extremely long action scene with very little dialogue, and that was it.
Yeah.
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 But
So, okay. It all depends on how you approach the film. I think for critics who most of them I think were, I guess, formally trained in filmmaking, in film analysis.
Film analysis theory.
Film theory. I'd like to think. You have a lot of English majors coming, so like you see them reviewing it from a more literary sense, right? Thematically, like you read the movie like you read a book, which I don't think if I think a good balance has to be made, because again, a lot of films have a literary basis, but a lot of films don't. There's film for film's sake, and there's to extend that, there's horror for horror's sake, which I think It Follows was a lot of that. I think more so in that school than it was to be a great dramatic story.
Yes.
Which it wasn't necessarily. I mean, it was dramatic, but not like moving in that sense. It was more horrific. I think The Babadook, on the other hand, was more of a great thematically told story than an actual horror for horror's sake. It was a nice blend of those two, but more on that side. But again, Mad Max Fury Road, action for action's sake, right? Okay. And so I think for action aficionados, this was a blessing. This was something that Jesus created. Maybe I'm calling George Miller Jesus, I don't know, but it was like the third coming of Jesus, if that's correct. I don't know, I'm Buddhist, man. Don't give me shit about this. It was all spectacle. It was wonderfully done. Like practical effects, explosions everywhere, but meaningful, like tasteful explosions, right? Where each explosion made an impact. It wasn't sensory overload. It was rhythmic. It was tribal. It was visceral.
It's very visceral. Yeah.
It wasn't like, not in the same sense as like a Michael Bay film would be, where it was just everywhere, like pointless and senseless, and you just had no idea what was going on. It was done so well that you had a general idea of what was going on at every moment.
Yes, I was never lost. I can say that. Yeah.
And that action is done well.
That is a really good accomplishment.
It impacts you much more. Each hit, each explosion. That made action an art. I think that film did.
Okay. And I think I'm starting to appreciate it more, but having come from I guess in movie watching history where plot was so important, and I the script was always my favorite part about all of my favorite films. Coming into Mad Max, which is totally far removed from that. I think.
Yeah, the screenplay was not life changing,
right,
or anything, right? And I think that's in general how people approach films at first, because what's the first thing that parents want to put in your hands when you're born? They're not gonna put in a freaking movie. They're not gonna put Citizen Kane. They're gonna put it in
Citizen Kane,
Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
We are conditioned to read literature from the very beginning, and that's how we want to read everything else from now on, right? From film to, music, not really. But music, lyric. We want to read more of the lyrics than we do want to read the actual, the music, the melody or something like that, right? I don't know exactly, but for film especially, a lot of people, when they first enter the appreciation of the craft of film, it's a lot more from a literary perspective.
Yes.
You scrutinize more on plot holes and the realism of how characters would act and the writing and everything like that.
Yeah.
And at some point in appreciating film, you start to realize that films are never going to be scientifically correct. There are always going to be loose threads and plot holes. But then, how was it effective visually, right? In telling that story, how do you tell a story visually? And you start to learn more and appreciate more about that. And I think that Mad Max is definitely one of the best action films in the last few years. Actually, it was so good. It was so good from the craft point.
Okay.
From a story, not exactly. There have been action movies with better stories, without a doubt. I'm pointing to like Captain America 2, Winter Soldier, where you feel a lot more invested in the characters. Or Inception, I consider that an action heist movie.
Yes.
And I think when the action was on there, I cared more about characters, and I was invested in their conflict. Right. So there you go. That's my spiel on that.
All right.
So yeah. Any other thoughts about the critics versus audience expectations? Again, it's about expectations and how you read a film. But I mean, that's totally okay. Like, I understand it if you didn't like Mad Max Fury Road, but you're also a loser. So that's a damn shame as well.
That's we'll talk later about that. But yeah. I don't know. I guess it shows the different expectations that critics and audience members have going into watching a film. Like, I wonder to what extent nowadays, like, audiences want the familiar or expecting the familiar.
What do you mean?
So, I mean, I think one reason why people wouldn't like Mad Max or It Follows, as was me with Mad Max, is just because like it totally.
They're subversive of the norm, right? Of the norm of the action film, and they like. I think when people think of action films these days, they're more expecting like action in the Marvel sense.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Right, action films in the Marvel sense, where there are a lot more cuts, a lot more. It's a lot more closer up, and every once in a while, there's always a clever quip from the protagonist about like the commentary on a situation or something like that. It's always, again, that's more on the writing end. Right, you want to just be exhilarated, feel joy when watching action movies, and there's something uncomfortable with the action in Mad Max, maybe.
Yes.
Right, because it was very violent too.
So primitive as well.
Yeah, primitive too. Yeah, so it makes you just feel uncomfortable, and just I guess again harkening back to sort of how we were back then. I mean, with the drums and everything, it is primitive, and it kind of shows you a darker side to humanity. Yeah. Right. Whereas other action doesn't necessarily want to do that. You're cheering on your protagonist. Yeah. You want them to succeed. Whereas here, you don't necessarily want more people to die, I guess. I don't know. I think it's different Mad Maxes. It was much more about having fun with the action, I guess, and like you kind of. Oh, okay. So it's the kind of the glorification of explosions and the act of killing. In a sense, right? Yeah. Whereas like the act of killing isn't a focus in Marvel movies or the action films like that.
Yeah. Or there seems to be like a, since there is dialogue, there's a much like clearer balance, I guess, of like where the energy is at. Yeah.
So I guess we go around in circles on this. I don't know exactly what we're trying to get at here. What were we talking about? Exactly, specifically, what was the question being asked?
The question about what?
Exactly.
The question about It Follows, or about the...
Oh, about the action movie, or...
No, I guess we're just trying to unpack the critic versus audience reaction to... Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Sorry. Just saw someone we knew out there. Some buds. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm lost, but that makes... No, okay, so we brought this up because of, I guess, the disparity in reactions, like, among the audience members.
Yes, okay. Yes. Yeah. So I think we covered that in quite great detail. Again, subversion... People like subversion, too. I'm not going to say that people hate subversion. Because, like, subversion in the Wes Anderson sense. Like, Wes Anderson I consider subversive as well. Visually subversive, I think. But it's more pleasant. But I guess people value pleasantry over unpleasantry. They want to feel safe and happy and, don't want anything unanswered by the end of the films. Right? And yeah, I get that. Like, it's supposed to be viscerally an uncomfortable feeling. And I think when filmmakers intend on doing that, then it's success, right? I think It Follows was successful because your friend stormed off.
There you go.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not arguably any piece of art that causes controversy or like causes that much of a divide succeeded in some way, and like making us think about what goes into like a great film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that Pleasantry isn't good as well. Like I enjoyed Cinderella.
Hopefully everyone likes pleasant things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like it was its point to be pleasant. Like it was trying to return to warmth and the good old days of when nothing had to be ironic. When nobody was trying to say something they didn't mean. Right? When everybody was sort of more genuine and warm and emphatic.
So I think understanding the intentions of the filmmaker is really important.
Yeah, and I think
nowadays,
that's what I think what the critics were tying into, right?
Yeah.
Like it worked, it did exactly what it wanted to do. So there you go.
Awesome.
So in the end, in conclusion, one might say that you are a loser if you didn't like It Follows or Mad Max. I'm just kidding, you're not a loser. Let us know in the comments if you like those films or not. What else do you think about It Follows? And while you're at it, give us a like, maybe subscribe to us if you haven't already, or listen to us on iTunes at The Culture Jockeys, or on our YouTube channel at The Culture Jockeys, or on Podomatic at The Culture Jockeys.
Yes. You can also follow me, my random thoughts on my Twitter at sharihu42, as well as on my blog, sharihu.wordpress.com. What about you, Richard?
You can follow me on the Twitters now at GGYOLOSWAG. GGYOLO swag, not yellow.
Gets me every time.
Yeah, I know, right? You can all follow me on my newly renovated WordPress blog.
Oh my god.
I categorize everything. It was so cool. I spent the afternoon doing that.
Wow, okay.
It's called Life in 24 Frames per Second.
Awesome.
Which, it looks so sexy now.
Alright, I'll just take a look
You
at
should
it.
check it out, please. And you guys too. You can also find me on Facebook at Richard Wynn. So, that's a roll, folks.
Sounds good. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching, and we will be out. Welcome to another episode with The Culture Jockeys. Coming to you live from the most relaxing room in Leverett House. We're spinning to you the latest and greatest in arts and entertainment. Fuck!
Wait, that was actually really good.
Wait, is this the other way?
Yeah.
Alright, let's see it.
Okay, also I'm gonna... Okay, I'm gonna pencil. Okay.
Nice.
That was good. That was good.
I kind of spit around your...
It's fine.
Oh, jeez. That was a good session, man.
That was really good. Yeah.
Pretty damn good.
Yeah.
I felt it. Did you feel it?
Oh yeah.
Alright.
I saw someone texted that to you.
Really?
No, on iMessage. I think someone wrote, alright.
Oh shit! Oh, what? I didn't see this.
No, it was one of the pings.
Oh, Melinda. Classic Melinda.